Over a decade ago, famed developer Hideo Kojima was responsible for the creation of a little-known franchise called Zone of the Enders. The series has garnered a cult following over the years, though the game's never achieved much success. While there's been no word of a sequel, Konami is throwing us a bone in the form of an HD collection. Is Zone of the Enders a forgotten gem that deserves a second look? Or is it a crude relic of a time long past?
Well, it's time to play.
The first Zone of the Enders takes place over 100 years from now, when humanity is expanded into space by establishing settlements on nearby planets. The discovery of an energy source called Metatron has set off a power struggle between several factions, and a young boy named Leo is caught in the middle of the conflict. He's forced to take control of a powerful mechanical suit called Jehudi, which apparently has the power to end the war that's ravaging mankind. The sequel takes place a few years after Leo's adventures, with a man named Dingo inadvertently coming across Jehudi during an attack by those hoping to claim the mech for their own. Dingo is unwillingly forced to pilot Jehudi in order to save his hide, and in the aftermath of the attack, he sets off to avenge his fallen comrades. It soon becomes clear there's much more at stake, and Dingo takes it upon himself to use Jehudi to bring an end to the destruction brought forth by the true culprits, an organization named Barum. If you're at all familiar with the Metal Gear narrative style, then you know what to expect from Zone of the Enders. Long, drawn-out bouts of dialogue and flashy cinematics that border on the ridiculous. The first game up and ends unexpectedly right as things are opening up, and it's jarring to say the least, but the plot wasn't that engrossing to begin with. The sequel, on the other hand, expands on the events of the original, bringing the world and its characters into clearer focus. Though it's a huge improvement, it ultimately suffers from a convoluted plot with sketchy writing, excessive exposition, and cardboard characters.
You're doing very well.
Shut up!
How did you feel when you killed them?
Shut up! Shut up! Ah!
The original Zone of the Enders was derided back in the day as being a poor game whose sole redeeming quality was the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo that came packaged with it. After completing the game ourselves, it's hard to find fault with that criticism. It's a bare-bones action game that lacks depth, and it's absurdly short, only taking a few hours at most to breeze through. The action basically boils down to traveling back and forth between tidy battle arenas in order to complete one of two objectives, either destroying all the enemies or seeking out an item that will allow you to progress further on the map. There's no real character progression, no sense of reward for your accomplishments, and the specific mission objectives are often unclear.
We have obtained the program.
Zone of the Enders, the second runner, is much better in comparison, which is apparent right from the outset with an improved interface, a better mission structure with proper levels, and an actual sense of progression. The enemy behaviors are much more diverse, and the boss encounters are easily the highlight, with clever attack patterns that will push you to the edge. A lot of the concepts pioneered by the original game are fully realized in the sequel, which outshines its predecessor in nearly every way.
Raptor destroyed.
One of the few bright spots of the original is the ability to travel back and forth between areas, which is missing in the decidedly more linear sequel. The second runner, despite all its improvements, could have benefited from much more needed depth, like the incentive to explore zones and find items that would be useful in unlocking new portions of previous areas. You can still poke around for extra ammo or health, but there's no real sense of exploration. However, many of the levels compensate for this shortcoming with truly creative objectives. The first Zone of the Enders wasn't a good game back in its day, and time hasn't done it any favors. However, the second runner is a solid action game that holds up well, despite some minor hiccups.
Raptor destroyed.
The Zone of the Enders games feature action that moves at a breakneck speed, and it's unlike anything else. The combat system might look simple on the surface, but there are several nuances to the mechanics that offer plenty of depth. The first game doesn't get a chance to tap into the system though, so encounters with your average enemy aren't very exciting. The second runner revs it up several notches to the point where even the most basic of enemies can become a thorn in your side, and the boss encounters are some of the most intense we've experienced. There's a significant learning curve in both games, which demand mastery over all of your maneuvers and abilities in order to succeed. You engage enemies easily enough, simply move into range and lock onto them, but the speed of combat can make battles disorienting at times. The combat system is at its best when you encounter opponents in smaller numbers, but it begins to fall apart when the on-screen enemy count swells up. That's when the lock-on system works against you, leaving you at its mercy as you try to toggle between targets. Despite the few kinks in the system, when it's truly on, the Zone of the Enders combat system offers exhilarating sequences that few games can match. Dodging and strafing around your opponents, blocking attacks at just the right moment, and using a wide variety of attacks feels consistently satisfying. The sequel ups the ante by introducing more complex grappling options, which allows you to not only grab opponents and hurl them around like dolls, but also pick up objects in the environment to use as shields or makeshift weapons. This allows you to get creative and tackle situations in a variety of ways, keeping things interesting from start to finish. Kojima's games are known for their exceptional visuals, and both Zone of the Enders entries were no exception. The HD treatment is on par with the recent Metal Gear collection, though the performance dips are more frequent here. The voice work hasn't aged all that gracefully, but the soundtrack is still superb with its unique fusion of orchestral arrangements and techno beats.
Raptor destroyed. Enemy destroyed.
There isn't much out there quite like Zone of the Enders. The first game is the weaker of the two, serving as a lukewarm appetizer for the main course. The second runner, though, with all its refinements and polished battle system, is certainly worth the price of admission. If you're looking for an experience that successfully captures the intensity of classic games in a manner seldom explored, lock your sights on this HD collection.
What's wrong? Is facing up to Anubis too tough for you?
See this and other GT shows and game reviews on the GT Originals iOS app, available now on the App Store.